Google launched its Pixel 3 and something called the Pixel Slate, which is basically a Surface ripoff. I'm here with Jason Hiner to talk about emerging hardware strategies and also what we should make of these devices. So, Jason, what's your take on, I guess let's start with the Pixel Slate, since that'll probably be, it could be a little more business focused than the other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing I was looking for, it definitely looks and feels a lot like a Surface, certainly. They were pretty shameless. And then the keyboard, the foldy keyboard thing looks a lot like the iPad Pro. So, they're pretty shameless in doing that. And, of course, it's got the built-in, Google Assistant. Now they've brought in the Android apps and now Linux apps, so it can do a little more. It's a little more full featured. I can see if you were a developer wanting a device on the road, because of that Linux heritage, some of that stuff might actually appeal to you. The thing that I was looking for, big, and as you and I were kind of messaging during the thing, was like, okay, pretty soon I was like, what's the cost, right? That's the biggest question, because the Surface, starts around $1,000. They released the Surface Go, which is sort of like, their little mini me version for $400. But this thing is really a competitor with the big kid Surface. So when they came in with that, okay, it's $600 for the actual the Slate, itself, and then it's $200 for the keyboard, and then it's $100 for the pen. So it's essentially $900. That's pretty close to the Surface. So almost feels a little too close to me for it to be really, a serious competitor, at least in terms of going in and gobbling up some market share from Microsoft. For the people that like that kind of device, I think this only hits you if you're really intent on, I want a googly device, and I want to be able to, have something that's maybe less likely to get attacked by malware or, that kind of stuff that you're not going to have because it's so, it's so limited in what it can do in the OS itself. So that was my big takeaway.
I think it suffers from all the things these convertibles kind of suffer with. So for one, you're Google. So if you are an enterprise that runs on Google, it kind of works. If you need to fire up Tableau for something, well, not quite.
Yeah.
The Android thing gets you into Microsoft Office pretty well. But yeah, it's that price tag. And, you can find alternatives if you're looking for that like Surface sort of form factor. You can get an HP, you can also get Chromebooks from Lenovo or HP or whoever. And, frankly, the quality's probably better, right? Because Google had its quality issues of late with, whether it was the Pixel or, a lot of their devices. So I think that's another issue. If they came down on price a bit, I'd probably be more into it. Right now, it's sort of more a fascination. It's like the Pixel laptop in a lot of ways too, right? It's priced as a premium device, but you're not quite ready to go there for something that's basically limited to Google's world.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Like, if this was half the price of the Surface Pro, then game on. If it's too close to it, then like you said, that's not only competing with that, but all of the other HP and the other ones. Plus, and if you're really into a Chromebook, there are solid Chromebooks from $200 to $500 where you can get a really good device and away you go, which typically is what Chromebooks are about. It's handing somebody a cheap laptop that they're not going to get in trouble with, and
right.
It's the thing with the Pixel, you mentioned the Pixel Book. I mean, I think we all thought that's a pretty good device. $1,200. There's not one person I can imagine recommending that to.
No, it's crazy. And, frankly, when it comes to that price thing, I feel that way about the Microsoft gear too.
About Surface.
Right? It's like a vanity overpriced sort of device. So the other thing they came out with today was the Pixel 3. And what strikes me about that is the price is a little better. Like the Pixel 3, the small one, the 5.5 inch at $800. Not too bad. And then the big one, which is 6.3, that starts at like $900 or so. Is it worth it? Or I guess where does it stack up, right? Because I mean, Google's big sell here, it's the AI, the software, the hardware. Their camera tricks are really second to none. But when I look at the iPhone, way expensive. The Note 9, not cheap either.
Yeah.
So the Pixel phone might actually find some mojo out there somehow.
I thought it was impressive. Again, I was looking at the price too, and when I saw, okay, it starts at $799. Essentially, it's $200 cheaper. The starting points are $200 cheaper than the iPhone. The phone looks nice. Like it doesn't certainly, doesn't look like a cheap phone, but it doesn't necessarily have the premium finish of the iPhone or the Samsung Galaxy devices either. So it looks like it should cost $200 less. That said, the phone, like you said, the camera mojo is pretty good. They got into that last year, and they really led. What they did with some of that camera, the AI mojo in their camera, was followed. Samsung and Apple eventually followed and have come along in their devices this year. The funny thing is with that Pixel 2 last year, it took really great pictures, but the display was such garbage that you couldn't really, they didn't really look good until you transferred them to another device. And some people will argue that, but the screen was so blue, it was so cold that really, even though you took great pictures on it, they didn't look great. So I'll be looking to see if it's better this time around. They did add some cool new features to the phone where they've taken it a step further than Samsung and Apple though. So like their wider selfie mode, they have the sort of top shot feature where you are taking a shot and you're giving it, a little extra time where it does the same thing that the other two, the Note and the iPhone XS do, where it takes multiple versions of that picture and then scrunches them together to make one good version, that corrects the lighting and all of that. So it's doing that same thing, but it does it like over a period of 2 or 3 seconds, right? So if your eyes are closed in one, or somebody's head's turned, or something weird happens in the background, you can basically just look at a series of shots and pick out the best one. And so I think that's pretty smart and a pretty good idea. It also automatically will. The problem most people have with photos is they get too far away, and it's really especially acute with these new cameras, because in order to take a really good picture of something close up, you have to get so close to somebody in their face that it's really creepy and awkward. So this way you can stand back and take a picture and it sort of automatically can crop in. So all of those are new features that this camera does in software that Samsung and Apple don't. I think those things are cool. I still think that it's a pretty small number of people that are actually going to buy Google hardware, though. I think that Samsung and Apple are going to sell a lot more phones, and this thing's going to be sort of this, kind of cool vanity project that everybody else is going to copy the features of next year.
Yeah, and when I look at a Pixel, I can't help but think this is just an HTC phone without the bloatware.
Yeah.
So as we talk about Google and how much hardware they're selling and that kind of thing, it totally dawns on me that, okay, so now Facebook has their hardware strategy that goes just beyond our Oculus, right? They had that big smart screen thing, which there's no way I'm letting them in my house any more than they already are. But there's a hardware strategy there now, right? It's sort of that phone, it's that kitchen assistant thing, video calling, and then you got the VR. Google, right? Google's not a hardware company, and a lot of times it shows. And the thing about Google is they've been at this for a long time, right? They bought Motorola, then they spun it out. They did the Nest thing, kind of screwed that up a good bit. And then they, acquire some assets from HTC, and that turns out to be the Pixel thing. Google's much better at partnering than they necessarily are building their own hardware. When I look at Microsoft, it all just feels overpriced to me, right? Like, dig the designs, but I've had the Surface, I've had quality issues with that before. It was older, but it was enough to where I'm not buying another one. Because I'd rather just buy an HP. I'd rather buy an HP or a Dell or a Lenovo Surface, basically. And then got Amazon, which is doesn't rhyme at all with the hardware company, and they've sort of carpet bombed the world with Echo devices. And the only screw up I can find is, they did that Fire phone, which didn't exactly work out. So in that landscape, how do you see Google hardware, and what do you think their strategy is, and how does it play out?
Yeah, kind of what we've been talking about. They've done pretty well with some of the software that goes into this hardware, where they seem to not have it right. Their stuff doesn't always look great. I think it sort of looks a little bit like a middle of the pack hardware. They quoted in this keynote today, that they'd won some design awards or whatever, and that kind of thing. But I mean, anybody can say that. Anybody can find anything, where somebody's said something nice about them in most cases. And I think their hardware is mostly looks middle of the pack kind of design wise, but they're doing really well with software. To your point, on partnering, it seems like they really could do a better job by, making some of their own software really good, and they're just partnering closely with some of these companies, with Lenovo, with Motorola, with HTC. I guess HTC's, mostly just a Google shop at this point, because the hardware game is obviously one that they're not great at, or maybe they find themselves in a place where they're like, we're just okay doing mediocre hardware, and we're going to put all the innovation in the software. But if they do that, they need to price more aggressively than what they are, because one of the reasons Amazon wins is their hardware. They're not trying to be the best, make the best, slickest, most whatever flashy hardware. They're trying to make hardware that's good enough and functional enough that you can use it, and we're going to price it extremely aggressively so that you're like, look at that price, your expectations go down a little bit, right? If you're paying $35 for an Echo Dot, you're not expecting it to be, gold plated or
Right.
super flashy. You're expecting, look, it works great. I paid, even if it didn't work or I didn't use it that much, my investment's not that great in it, so I'm pretty happy. I think they'd be much better off learning from Amazon and doing it more like Amazon and just pricing stuff more aggressively and then innovating on software.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of these guys are totally enamored with this premium sort of market, which I probably equate to Apple envy.
Totally.
But for somebody like Google, I'm kind of like, all right, so I want a cool phone, I want good hardware, I want a good price, and I want the Google, bloatware-free experience. Well, yeah. I don't know. It comes when I look at the Pixels, I go, all right, who do I trust? Do I trust HMD, which makes Nokia phones, or Google to make its own phones? I'm thinking maybe the Nokia for half the price is for the win.
Yeah.
So that's the part where, the specs matter and all that stuff. And I'd almost rather see them go super premium and charge $1,200 because you're probably selling the same amount of them anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah,
so
the whole thing's tricky.
Yeah, that's two different ends of the spectrum there. But you also have so many of these low cost Android vendors now making pretty strong hardware at low, at 500 or less. Honor, OnePlus. There's some good devices out there that don't cost much, and so that changes some of the expectations a little bit as well. Do I want to pay an extra $300 premium for those pretty cool camera features that I mentioned if I was in the market for an Android device? I don't know. I mean, the OnePlus 6T, I think it is, comes out at the end of this month. I'd probably hold off. If I was in the market for a high-end Android device, I'd probably hold off for that and see what it's going to do, what it's got, because save $300-400 and get, something that's 95% as good makes a lot of sense. I think most people.
Yeah, I think at some point we're going to say our cameras are good enough and call it a day.
Yeah.
And then all these hardware guys are kind of screwed because that's the only thing they're developing really. It's about the camera over and over again.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
Sounds good. Thanks, Larry.